7 people killed and 48 injured, 21 of them in critical condition. A third major attack in 3 months and 4 days before polling day. Will terror change the course of British politics? We've obtained this video from an eyewitness who says these are the 3 attackers roaming through Borough Market after stabbing people in their path. Within minutes, the 3 alleged attackers were shot dead by police. We're live on Borough High Street for a specially extended news programme tonight, just down from the market where people enjoying a normal Saturday night in London were slashed and stabbed by 3 men just after 10 o'clock last night.
People crazy, just they with a knife. Just push the people and kill it like they don't care
and
about nothing.
You saw that?
Yeah, we was in front of them.
The attack began on London Bridge, just further up that road, when the men drove a van at pedestrians in the same way as the Westminster Bridge attack in March, before going on a rampage with knives. As police have the area locked down, the main political parties suspended election campaigning. But there is some fury in Labour that Theresa May unveiled a 4-point plan to change the way we tackle terrorism, even though she's been in charge of it for 7 years.
Our country has made significant progress in disrupting plots and protecting the public. But it is time to say enough is enough.
Within hours, police were raiding flats in Barking, East London. At least 12 people have been arrested.
Here in Manchester, solidarity with London from a city itself struck by terror barely 2 weeks ago. Thousands are here for a concert in memory of the 22 who lost their lives. It will be attended by many of those who survived.
Declaring enough is enough, Theresa May promised a sweeping review of Britain's counter-terrorism measures, while police have tonight promised increased physical security on London's bridges to protect the public. More on that later, but first Paul McNamara reports on last night's events. And I must warn you, there are distressing images and details, as well as flash photography in this report.
This is what terror looks like, inflicted at the heart of the capital on a busy summer's Saturday night. An attack we would later find out lasted just 8 minutes, though its effects will echo for years to come.
You need to go.
This is London Bridge just after 10 p.m. last night, home of one of the city's busiest train stations next to the bustling restaurant district of Borough. Customers cowered as police told them to, crouching for fear of what waited outside. This is what waited outside, according to an eyewitness. These video pictures, believed to be the first to emerge of the alleged attackers, were obtained by Channel 4 News and are now in possession of the police. They show 3 men marching through Borough Market. The person who filmed it said they heard screaming and looked out onto the street to see these men slashing and stabbing multiple victims. Each man was brandishing a knife, eyewitness said. The eyewitness hid, then took these pictures. Look closely. There appears to be a string of canisters around each of their waists. These are hoax explosive vests, according to the police. The alleged attacker in the blue t-shirt appears to be the same man as in this picture. The string of canisters clearer in this image, taken after he had been shot by police.
He's crashed, obviously, just at the end of the bridge.
Another eyewitness describes the beginning of last night's horrors. This rented white van sped along London Bridge, driven by one of the attackers, veering into crowds on the pavements before crashing. This dashcam footage shows the aftermath, victims receiving treatment on the left, terrified members of the public fleeing on the right. After crashing, armed with their knives, the attackers headed for the restaurants of Borough Market.
What did you see, or what's been going on with you for the past hour and a half?
We see the people.
People crazy, just they with a knife, just push the people and kill it like they don't care
And
about nothing.
you saw that?
Yeah, we was in front of them.
So how many people did you see?
I saw 3, but
3 with
they say
knives?
it's more than 3. I don't know really how many people.
Almost immediately, firearms officers were on the scene.
Apparently there's been an attack. So we've just heard a couple of sounded like shots, but we can't be confirmed at the moment. There's a lot of activity behind us, a lot of police officers shouting, and the helicopter's in the air.
Within 8 minutes of the first call to the emergency services, the attackers were dead. The counter-terrorism police chief said armed officers fired an unprecedented number of bullets to make sure they neutralised attackers who appeared to be suicide bombers.
Well, go open for them back door. Go open back door for them. Go open the back door, quick.
Shops opened their doors to terrified strangers.
Go. Yes.
Sanctuary sought wherever it could be found.
I just ran. I done a big wall, and that's it. I hid in the bin, in a big bin.
How long were they there?
Like 30 minutes, 35, inside the bin.
Police moved building by building, freeing those hiding for safety. Some were left crouching, terrified behind bars and down cellars for hours.
Keep moving as quickly as you can.
When they emerged, it was with hands held on heads, some inconsolable.
Please.
From a night that claimed at least 7 innocent lives and left dozens scarred.
Well, police have been giving more details about their response, saying officers fired an unprecedented 50 rounds at the 3 attackers, fearing they were wearing suicide devices. One member of the public was wounded in the process. The counter-terrorism chief, Mark Rowley, said detectives were now trying to establish whether others were involved in planning the attack. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel reports on what more we know about the events of last night and the authorities' response.
This attack was, in the Prime Minister's words, part of a new trend, but countered with a revised form of rapid reaction. A vehicle, in this case a hired van, and knives, echoes of Westminster 3 months ago. Only this time there were 3, wearing fake suicide vests, which again, in the words of the Prime Minister, was to sow seeds of panic.
We are experiencing a new trend in the threat we face, as terrorism breeds terrorism, and perpetrators are inspired to attack, not only on the basis of carefully constructed plots after years of planning and training, and not even as lone attackers radicalised online, but by copying one another and often using the crudest of means of attack.
There was nothing subtle about yesterday. The bridge has all day been a forensic scene. Details are still emerging. The attackers' hired van began its murderous route across London Bridge just before 10 last night. Police were alerted at 8 minutes past 10 as pedestrians were being mowed down. The vehicle was abandoned on the south side of the bridge, and then 3 men armed with knives ran down a stairway into Borough Market, teeming with people on a night out. By 10:16, the 3 men had all been shot dead by 8 police marksmen outside a pub in Stony Street by the side of the market. The speed of the response has been much praised, but there are questions over reducing the threat level post-Manchester.
Was lowering the threat level a mistake?
You will have observed that we were able to respond to this incident extremely quickly, within literally 8 minutes. We were already at a very high level of alertness. Severe means that an attack is highly likely, and the threat level was at severe.
But last night's rampage has prompted a review of UK security and counter-terrorism strategy. This is the 3rd attack in 10 weeks. 34 people have been killed. And during that time, MI5 has foiled 5 more plots.
There is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. So we need to become far more robust in identifying it and stamping it out across the public sector and across society. That will require some difficult and often embarrassing conversations.
But the immediate focus is on finding out if there's an East London network behind this latest atrocity. 12 were arrested this morning in raids on this block of flats in Barking. And the attacker's van, Channel 4 News understands, may also have come from the same area of London. It was rented by the hour from Hertz and collected, we believe, from this B&Q store in Romford. We were told that the store manager had been speaking to police all morning, but no one would confirm that that was where the journey to London Bridge began. One resident from the block which was raided recognised his neighbour in a photograph as one of the attackers.
He's quite getting inquisitive about the van. He was saying to me, oh, where can I get a van from? Just asking real details, how much was it? And just like asking where he could get a van, basically. And then he said to me, oh, I might be moving shortly with my family as well. So I was like, oh, all right then. And then, yeah, that was it.
More raids later this afternoon on a flat above a bookies, thought to be the home of another of the attackers. But what also worries police is the potential impact on communities, and they have appealed for calm.
Well, with me now are three people who were caught up in last night's terrifying events in different ways. Richard Angel, let me start with you. What happened?
Well, we were in a restaurant having a lovely time with our friends, and as the table nearest the door, we became very aware that the security in Borough Market were saying, bolt down the door and duck and cover. And people followed suit. A young, underpaid waiter ran at the door, put his foot behind it and made us safe, and people ran to their safety. We tried to make sure we got those people upstairs. We didn't open the exit and various other things.
Did you know what you were running from?
It was tattooed across all of our faces that there was a terrorist act happening and nobody needed to be told twice that you needed to act quickly. We could see opposite, there was a guy who was throwing the tables who turned out to be this heroic man who was trying to save the young woman being stabbed. I then could see a few minutes later somebody leave the bar next door, a man absolutely covered in blood, holding his chest or his neck and clearly being a victim, meandering through the maze that is the market, and I hope that he found the emergency services that he so desperately needed.
Alex Shellen, what was your experience? Where were you?
Well, I was in the Mudlark pub underneath London Bridge with my girlfriend and two friends. And then it's around 10 o'clock or just after, a woman in her early 20s sort of staggers into the bar. We could see that she was heavily bleeding from her neck, and it appeared to us that her throat had been cut. She then collapsed in the bar and people ran to her aid. They then cleared the bar, police were immediately on the scene, and then they drove off in the direction of London Bridge. A minute later, armed police arrived and told us to run away from the direction of London Bridge. And as we moved, I could see emergency services attending to a further woman on the floor, and they were performing CPR.
I mean, Richard said everybody instinctively knew what was going on in some way. Is that your experience?
I think that my experience would be a little bit dissimilar to that, in only that there was a state of confusion. For a while it took people to grasp what was occurring, but once it had done, there was a sense of panic, but at the same stage, everyone ran to assist the woman until the emergency services arrived.
Liam Connell, now you were also just down here in Borough Market, weren't you?
Yeah, I was at Cats and Jammer, and I mean, it was different in the sense that we didn't actually know what happened. So we were started to get evacuated by staff, and then the police came in and started saying, get to the floor, get to the floor. From there was murmurs that, I heard that it was a shooting, a stabbing. We didn't know.
And you were filming as you were going
Yes.
along. I think we can see some of the material you were filming on your phone.
Yeah, I filmed basically the whole time. So it was about 10:20 when it all first started, and we were eventually evacuated at about 11ish.
What was going through your mind?
Well, see, at first we didn't know what happened. It wasn't until armed police started coming and someone from outside had actually come inside. And because I was filming, my friends did say to me, oh, I think he's from outside, and he'd had like a white bandage around his neck. So one of my friends was sitting with him and like calming him down while I sort of stood there and held his bandage. So as soon as that all started, it was very apparent what had happened.
You've all been through a horribly traumatic experience, and I know you've all been talking about it all day, probably to different media outlets, and I wonder whether you've had any time to process it or how you feel about things now.
Well, when I spoke to the media this morning in the early hours, I said at the time that I would not allow this incident to stop me from continuing to enjoy our way of life, and that is a statement which I hold true to in the cold, hard light of day. There would be nothing stopping me from going into a central London pub now, sinking a few beers with my mates. But I meant something more than that as well. And what I meant is that by our way of life, I mean that is best encapsulated by our values. values of democracy, diversity, and genuine justice. And to my mind, to allow them to be compromised in the face of these atrocities would be to let them win.
Richard, what has struck you?
I think what Alex just said in many ways, the kind of Britishness of it all and the fact we're coming together, that people out there are trying to divide Londoners and we are defying them at every stage. We're showing them we're going to go out with our girlfriends, out with our friends, flirt with handsome men, and if that pisses them off, sorry to say that on Channel 4, but we are going to defy them and we're going to be better and stronger for it. And also the armed services, the people who come out and save us, like, they run at danger. And it struck me that not only do they do their job brilliantly, they were our eyes and ears to get us to safety, and the paramedics go into the danger. They turn their back on the danger. They put the lives together in front of us while we're running for our lives behind them. And that's remarkable. They're brave, they're brilliant, and they're the best of British. Manchester set the tone, and London is backing that up this week.
A lot of people today watching this coverage are feeling afraid. They're wondering whether they're safe. Do you feel in danger, having been through this?
The police were with us the whole time. Everyone was looking after each other. We had a hotel who let us in. They gave us water, a place to sit down for a bit. We had, just everyone were helping each other out. The police were there the whole time. As we were evacuating, we were kind of just running, didn't know where we were going to, but there was a police person the whole step.
Liam Connell, Alex Shellam and Richard Angel, thank you all very much indeed, and I hope you managed to get some rest now. Well, police have opened a casualty bureau for anyone worried about friends or relatives who may have been caught up. There are two numbers, 0800 096 1233 and 020 7158 0197. Now, Theresa May has made a private visit to some of the attack victims and hospital staff who've been treating them. NHS England say that 21 people remain in a critical condition tonight. Of the 7 people who died, it's now known that 1 was Canadian. Hospital and ambulance workers rushed to the scene within minutes, volunteering to work extra shifts and through the night to help the emergency response. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald is outside King's College Hospital. Victoria.
Yes, Krishnan, throughout the night, of course, the emergency services reacted, as we heard there, with incredible bravery. I'm outside King's College Hospital, where 14 of those patients were brought. Now, this is a major trauma centre, and they're saying now that there are 8 still in critical care. In the past hour, we've just heard from the mother of one of those patients. His name is Daniel O'Neill. He's 23, and she told us how he stepped outside a bar in Borough Market to make a phone call.
Just stepped outside the bar for a second, and a man went up to him and said, "This is for my family, this is for Islam," and stuck a knife straight in him. He's got a 7-inch scar going from his belly round to his back. When the police were there, the police brought him in their car to the hospital. The police have been absolutely fantastic. Nurses, staff have been absolutely amazing.
Madam, could I just ask you, how did you... Yes, NHS England has confirmed that 36 patients are still in hospital, 21 in critical care. Now, as you heard before, the emergency services reacted within minutes, and they have been praised, as they were in Manchester and on the Westminster Bridge attack. Now, of course, they plan for this. They have exercises for this, but as people on the ground say at the time, you can never really be prepared for what happens, for the scenes that greet you. And as your guest said earlier, it's about these people, the emergency services, rushing towards those who are injured and those who have sadly died. And we've just heard in the past few minutes too that 4 of those are French. One of them is seriously injured. Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, has also just in the past hour said that 80 paramedics turned up to the scene and that there were doctors who cycled across London to get the operating theatres up and running and to perform surgery on those very critically ill victims. Now, some of you may find some of the scenes in my report, some of the details in my report, distressing.
Within 6 minutes of the first calls, the London Ambulance Service was at the scene of the attacks. Declaring a major incident, they were backed up by trauma teams from the London Air Ambulance Service. And one of their spokesmen said the situation had been highly complicated and dangerous. 6 people were declared dead at the scene. That later rose to 7, and it has now been confirmed 1 was a Canadian. 48 injured were taken to 5 hospitals. One of those had been shot after being caught in police crossfire. 21 people tonight remain in a critical condition.
The emergency services reacted heroically and brilliantly last night. Not only did they tackle the terrorists, but they helped the injured. And as a result of their swift action, fewer people have died than would otherwise be the case, but also the severity of the injuries are less bad than they could have been.
It was a devastating sight. One homeless man, named only as Steve, described seeing a woman knocked down.
I seen a man in a van knock a woman over, and then obviously concerned, so I ran over the road to her aid, and there was no one around there. So I picked her head up, took my coat off.
Some of the injured have now been identified. Sunday Express business editor Jeff Ho was stabbed in the throat when he tried to help a wounded bouncer. Mr. Ho was filmed being led away from the scene by a policeman clutching his neck with his shirt off. 32-year-old New Zealander Oliver Dowling was stabbed in the face, neck and stomach and was in an induced coma. He had 4 hours of surgery. It's believed his girlfriend, Murray Bondeville, was also injured, but her condition is not known. Mr. Dowling's sister Freddie wrote on Facebook, "This is heartbreaking. Get well soon, Oliver and Marie." 2 Australians are also believed to have been caught up in the attack. One of them, Candice Hedge, aged 31, from Brisbane. She had just finished her shift in Elliott's Cafe when she was stabbed in the neck. She wrote on Facebook, "Hey everyone, just so you know, I'm doing okay. Bit of pain, but I will survive. Thanks for your thoughts and well wishes. Love to all." This injured man described how the attacker came at him.
All of a sudden the guy comes up with a knife, and I'm like this, ducks it, stabs me there, and I just like push him off, blood's going everywhere. I walk into a pub and I'm like, someone help me, I've just been stabbed. Yeah.
A British Transport police officer who is believed to be here in King's College Hospital was one of the first on the scene. He was stabbed in the face, head and leg. An off-duty Met police officer is also being treated for injuries not believed to be life-threatening. Chief Constable Paul Crowther, who visited the Transport police officer in hospital, said later, "It became clear that he showed enormous courage in the face of danger, as did many others who were at the scene and rushed to help. Although he is seriously unwell, he was able to recount how he faced the attackers armed only with his baton outside London Bridge Station." More names, including those who have died, are expected to be released over the next few days.
Well, in the midst of this latest tragedy, it's important to remember that less than 2 weeks ago, 22 people lost their lives in the Manchester suicide bombing. Tonight, the American star Ariana Grande will be back in the city for the One Love Manchester concert. Her manager says it now has a greater purpose. And despite the increased security, music fans have not been deterred from turning up. Our North of England correspondent Kieran Jenkins is at Old Trafford. Kieran.
Well, we talked a lot in the past fortnight about defiance. This here tonight is on another level. Some 50,000 people are here to stand united as one against hate and in remembrance of those who lost their lives, sadly no longer in one terrorist attack, but of 2. Now they will hear a host of stars. They will hear Ariana Grande, who headlined that concert 13 nights ago. And the moment that she takes the stage this evening will be mesmerising as she looks out into the crowd and addresses the 14,000 or so people who were here tonight and who were there that night. And among them, you can't help but be drawn towards the children, some of them as young as 7 or 8 years old, still wearing the T-shirts that they bought that night, and they go into this concert clutching their parents' arms. And it's in those moments that you are reminded that this is not business as usual, that this event is taking place among an almost unprecedented level of police and security, and that many of these minds here too are filled with the recent and fresh horrors of last night's events in London. A concert called under the shadow of grief, no longer of one, but 2 great cities. Rarely has normality been so highly policed or so anxiously anticipated. How do you feel right now at this moment? Do you feel safe? Do you feel a little bit scared?
I'm a little bit on the edge, but I still feel safe.
Among the crowd, children who bore witness to the horror of 13 nights ago.
She's my best pop star.
And who found the courage to return. Are you looking forward to it?
Kind of.
Kind of? Why only kind of?
Because I'm scared it's going to happen again.
You're scared? And what's Mum saying about that?
We can't let people win, can we? We need to carry on doing the things we enjoy. Yeah. And we'll be really safe. We've got lots of police, haven't we?
Okay.
Yeah?
Seeing people caught up in another terrorist incident last night, what were you feeling?
Just sick. Sick. You know, all the sirens and the police, it just brought everything back from 2 weeks ago.
Tonight will be this 14-year-old's second ever concert.
I'd never been to a concert before, so I wanted to take a picture of the arena, and then as I was filming it, the bomb went off.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened?
These terrified young voices
Oh my God!
belong to Ellie Cheetham and her friend and were broadcast around the world.
How do you feel about it now?
I feel really angry about it at times, and at times I feel sad because 22 people lost their lives and they didn't deserve that at all. And the fact that this man has targeted like a children's concert, so the fact that he targeted people our age and stuff, it's just sick.
Was it a difficult decision for you to let Ellie go tonight?
Yes, we said no originally, but then we realised that we were kind of going to punish her, really, and she'd done nothing wrong, and I think she would have felt punished if we hadn't let her go.
Thousands of families who survived the attack have made the same defiant call, even as they feel the tremors of last night's terror.
It's going to be therapy for us, you know what I mean? To come back and it to be a normal concert and for everything to go right, but I can't.
This evening will bring painful recollection, solidarity too, but above all, remembrance for 22 people who went to a concert and did not return.
Well, normal politics hasn't quite been suspended today, as the PM confirmed the election will go ahead as planned on Thursday. She used her response to the attack to outline her plans on national security, while Jeremy Corbyn will give a speech in the next half hour addressing the attack and setting out Labour's values. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, in those words you were just referring to that Theresa May delivered here this morning, Labour's saying she didn't at all sound like someone who'd suspended national campaigning, and it's been pointed out that the policies that she said were now more than ever required after the London Bridge killings are all policies that are listed in the Conservative manifesto. For his part, Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, is going to make a speech a little bit later on tonight in which he weaves in a theme that he's been talking about throughout the general election campaign, public spending cuts, specifically police cuts, and he's going to say in his speech, you can't protect the public on the cheap.
The Prime Minister paid a private visit to injured victims of the attack in hospital this afternoon. Earlier, Theresa May announced that national campaigning in the general election would be suspended for the day, though Labour claimed she used the prime ministerial podium in Downing Street for a highly political statement.
So in light of what we are learning about the changing threat, we need to review Britain's counter-terrorism strategy to make sure the police and security services have all the powers they need. And if we need to increase the length of custodial sentences for terrorism-related offences, even apparently less serious offences, that is what we will do. Since the emergence of the threat from Islamist-inspired terrorism, our country has made significant progress in disrupting plots and protecting the public. But it is time to say enough is enough.
Labour's Emily Thornberry said the Prime Minister was pushing commitments from her manifesto when she should have been staying politically neutral. Jeremy Corbyn said democracy must prevail, but it was right that national campaigning was suspended for today.
This has got to be the worst. I hope it will not disrupt our process, because we have to have a democratic process, but I also hope we'll reflect on the need to have sufficient police officers on our streets, but also sufficient intelligence to look at the terrorist threat. But in response, as in Manchester, all communities must come together. Our strength is the strength of our community unity. That was shown in Manchester straight after the horrible event there, and I'm sure it'll be exactly the same in London.
Theresa May signalled she would like to bring in tougher sentencing for some offences currently deemed less serious. They could include handling and creating jihadist propaganda. The Lib Dem leader warned the country must be careful not to overreact.
What we must not do is to trade away our freedoms, our great British freedoms, in response to the cowardly acts of these pathetic people last night. If we did that, they would have won.
UKIP insisted it was wrong to suspend campaigning for 1 second, as that was what the attackers wanted. One US network reported that the White House had discussed the possibility of President Trump visiting the UK later this week to express his sympathy for those attacked.
And there is some discussion, George, among the president's aides about possibly taking a trip to London at the end of the week to show solidarity with the people of London against terrorism. That's just in the infancy stage, but there is some discussion among the president's aides.
It wasn't clear if the White House realised that the UK would be busy hearing the election result on Friday morning, as despite 2 terrorist attacks since the election was called, demands to postpone polling day have been dismissed. The date, this Thursday, isn't changing.
Well, both Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May are saying the first thing they'll do if they get into Number 10 after the general election is order a review or a report into what seems to be a new phase in terrorism, copycat terrorism, terrorist acts that don't require quite as much organisation or material. And what they're pointing out in Number 10 is that they think these are potentially going to be much more frequent unless they're dealt with. Looking at the statistics, they're saying when you look at plots that have been uncovered, foiled, attacks that have actually happened, we could be looking at the moment at a 5-fold increase in terrorist attacks. One of the things that the Prime Minister's clearly been thinking about for a while in terms of dealing with this is trying to catch people before they get to the point when they attack, perhaps increasing the sentences for what at the moment are considered in law lesser offences like studying literature on jihadism or attacks, that sort of thing, maybe increasing the custodial sentences for those sorts of offences, and maybe that way getting some people off the streets who might otherwise be there.
Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative Nadhim Zahawi and Labour's Neil Coyle. Now, I suppose in normal circumstances, if there wasn't an election, we would spend all our time talking about what's happened and paying tribute, perhaps, to the people involved. But there is an election on Thursday, so we've got to get to that. But I know, Neil Coyle, you will want to pay tribute to the response.
Yeah, absolutely. The local community here has been absolutely fantastic in the generosity that it's shown to try and help all of those affected last night, and the well wishes to those who've lost loved ones, but also those who are awaiting news from those who are still in hospital, but also the support for our, not just the police and emergency service, but our health service, that are still treating those victims of these murderous scumbags.
Nadhim Zahawi?
I think, well, the police response, 8 minutes from the moment they got the alarm to all the terrorists were dead. A big thank you to them, but we also got to remember those 7 innocent people whose families' life is clearly, from today onwards, will never be the same. 21 who are critical. Borough Market, London Bridge, this is the greatest city on earth, and it will always be the greatest city, and it will never bend to the will of terrorists.
We are voting on Thursday. And even though the 2 main parties sort of said they were suspending their campaign, the campaign seemed very much on from Theresa May's statement in Downing Street. I mean, Nadhim Zahawi, she said we've been too tolerant of extremism in the public sector. Where has the public sector been too tolerant?
Well, I think what we've got to do is make sure we take another look at this. As the Prime Minister said, look, in the last 2 months, 3 terrorist attacks have taken place. 5 of them have been foiled. However good our security response has been, we must look at it again. I said today...
But who's too tolerant?
Well, I'm about to tell you. So I said today that we've been far too tolerant of intolerance. So there are too many Salafist, jihadi sort of people who are preaching extremism in our country that, for whatever reason, they feel that they're able to operate and get away with it. it's right that we should look at that, because they aren't only against our own values. They're against the values of decent Muslims who are outraged
So you
tonight.
want to change the law now?
Well, I think we should look at everything. There should be no area we should not look at. I'm not going to sort of make policy on the hoof here, but all I'm saying to you is those people who hate our way of life, our values, they also, by the way, hate the way of life of decent Muslims. They attack their own people, other Muslims who are tonight outraged. I've had so many text messages and emails from people who said, please say that tonight on Channel 4. Decent, law-abiding Muslims, millions of them in the UK, are outraged and hurt deeply. This attack happened at the break of fast for Ramadan.
Neil Coyle, I mean, it does seem that Theresa May has a 4-point plan for how to start tackling this.
We're not even 24 hours after an attack. This is not the time to get into political ding-dong. The Prime Minister, some people think those comments are insensitive given that there are 21 people still in critical condition in hospital. But I think we should focus on our commonality, focus on the unity, focus on making sure that whatever the circumstances, whatever's happened in the past, our police and emergency services have every power and every resource they need to both respond when incidents like this happen, but try and prevent as many of those attacks as humanly possible.
People have got to decide on Thursday under who are they more safe? Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May? Why are they more safe under Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, we have said, and I think it's unfortunate and a little bit distasteful that you're making this into a political ding-dong.
I'm not making it into a political ding-dong. I'm just saying the reality is we are in an election campaign.
Of course, there will be people out there who recognise that Theresa May, one way or another, has been in charge of our police and security services for 7 years. We've lost 20,000 police nationally. Labour are committed to more police and more resources for the police. And we've also had changes to the powers the police have been able to use to try and tackle, intervene and monitor those who are suspected of being involved in terrorism. That will need to be very carefully looked at, but I think that should happen after Thursday.
But do you expect your leader, who's making a speech in half an hour, to lay out his response in terms of new legislation, new powers, more police on the streets? What are you expecting to hear?
I think what he will be saying is that now is the time to focus on unity, what the spirit we saw here and the spirit we saw in Manchester, the fact that we have a democracy that these people are trying to subvert, that should be the focus. That will be his focus. It will be on what unites us, what defines us as against those who want to commit murder of innocent civilians in our communities.
Did you think enough was enough, or enough is enough, is a slightly odd thing to have said by Theresa May? I mean, it suggests that you would tolerate a certain amount, but now we've had enough.
Well, because we pride ourselves on being an incredibly tolerant society, and I think that's a great thing. But for whatever reason, there are people living amongst us who are intolerant of our values, the stuff that Neil's just been talking about, the stuff that we saw people coming together in Manchester, that people coming together in Borough Market today. They dislike the way we live. They dislike the way young girls want to go to see their favourite singer at a concert, and they want to attack it. They want to divide us today. They'd like to see us being divided today. I think what Theresa May is saying is, look, we must be intolerant of that behaviour.
But she said things have got to change.
That's right, and she's right to look at that.
She's been in charge for 7 years.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with saying, look, we've got to do more. We've got to redouble our effort, and I'd like to think we can do it collectively if I'm returned to Parliament.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I mean, are you saying that the government should call in the leader of the opposition, other senior political figures, to try and tackle this problem together? Well, that would be a complete political departure.
Well, today, Sadiq Khan, the mayor of this great city, was in working with our Prime Minister on the response to what happened last night. That's a good thing.
Would she work with Jeremy Corbyn on the response
I think
to terror?
we've got to work collectively with the Labour Party, with the Liberal Democrats, with every party to get this right, because these people are amongst us. Unfortunately, they are as much a chimera to the Muslim community. They are subverting Islam. They are warping.
Do you think that's an invitation Jeremy Corbyn would take if Theresa May said, work with us on the response to terror, if she was in government after Thursday?
I hope whoever is in charge after the election would work with everyone to get the best outcome and to make sure our police have not just the resources, the finance, but the toolkit to intervene, to be able to monitor, and to compel some of those who allow hate language and the venom and poison that we see on some sites to be better tackled. And I hope there is no disagreement with any political party in making sure that that is tackled and the police have every power they need.
Neil Coyle, Nadeem Zahawi, thank you both very much. for coming. Well, while most world leaders immediately expressed their solidarity with London, not so Donald Trump. In a series of tweets, the US president railed against political correctness and criticised the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, quoting part of his statement as saying there was no reason to be alarmed. A spokesman for Mr. Khan said the mayor's comments had been deliberately taken out of context, but he had more important things to do than respond, describing Mr. Trump's tweets as ill-informed. Well, there have been many remarkable stories of what people saw, did and got involved with through last night's attacks. Our reporter Jane Deeth has been speaking to Jack Appleby, who owns a restaurant inside Borough Market and suddenly found himself at the very centre of last night's attack.
There was probably about 20, 30, maybe more people running down the street, and there's one particular girl who said that they're stabbing everyone, like, you need to just go, go, go sort of thing.
The woman screaming the warning was Rhiannon Owen.
I saw one of the three guys.
And what was he doing?
He was just running, carrying a knife.
Was he saying anything? How far away was he?
From me, a few metres.
That must have been a pretty terrifying experience.
I thought I was going to die.
First thing I did was I just literally turned around and just said to the customers, like, get to the back, get to the back, get to the back. And that's when they were all three like, of these men were standing there with machetes and they had some sort of belt on, and it just, yeah, I looked at them and genuinely just, yeah, it was very scary.
Was there eye contact? Did they look at you?
I think there was, yeah. It's kind of like, it's the only image I've mainly got really now. I just remember looking at them and there's three of them standing there, literally like in the restaurant.
Did they say anything? Did they have, what was the expression on their faces?
I remember one saying something to another. There was some words were muttered to another, and from that point is when they moved on. Nothing was said out loud or shouted to us, but from whatever was said there, it was almost like, no, let's go there. I think maybe everyone being at the back of the restaurant, it wasn't an easy sort of go in and do that. It would have been quite complicated for them. I mean, there was a kitchen full of anything we could have used. We literally just ran to the front, got our key, put it in the shutter, and just try getting that shutter down, just so they can't get in that way, which came to a bit of a obstacle when the shutter's going at like a very slow speed, and he's actually, my colleague's looking out, like keeping an eye out for them. We've got everyone else at the back, and we're just trying to get it down, and we got it as low as we could, but we couldn't get all the way because I had to get back in, so I just rolled back in the bottom. We barricaded the bottom, and we got them all upstairs, and probably about 5 minutes later, you're hearing gunshots. It might pause for a bit, and then out of nowhere, probably about 20 minutes, I'd say, on and off gunshots coming in. The assailants, they were on the floor, but the fact they actually went down outside the restaurant, that makes it all a bit more frightening.
They were in there, crouched beneath the windows for an hour and a half until the police came to rescue them.
It was sort of hands on head, like you were running. I mean, everyone
had to put your hands on your head. Hands
on your head, running down Stony Street. You're running straight through the crossroads, like all the way to the Shard. They said to go to the Tower Bridge and go as fast as you can. So everyone was pretty terrified.
You're incredibly rational and measured about the whole thing. Do you think it's hit you yet?
Maybe, I don't know. I think probably more when I'm just on my own, really, and thinking about it. That's probably the worst. I was in a black cab on my own on the way back, and it's like your head's going all over the place, really. What if they did come in the restaurant, or what if we didn't put the shutters down? What if, yeah, so many what ifs.
Well, joining me now from Manchester is the former Chief Prosecutor, Nazir Afzal. In a moment, I'll be talking to the Conservative peer and former Foreign Office Minister, Baroness Varsi. And here with me on Borough High Street in London, Nimco Ali, social activist from the Women's Equality Party, and Alan Mendoza from the Henry Jackson Society. Nazir Afzal, let me come to you first. What should the government's response to this be?
Firstly, it should pay tribute to the phenomenal work of the emergency services last night. Secondly, it needs to work closer with the community. I mean, a lot of people say that I'm a vocal supporter of Prevent. I'm on the record of saying that it's flawed. And it's flawed because it's poorly communicated, there's poor community engagement, it's poorly understood, sometimes deliberately misunderstood. But at the same time, it's simply safeguarding. And I think there's something I would suggest, and I have suggested, is that in fact we're engaging with the wrong people, that there's no other community. The white community don't have community leaders, but somehow the Muslim community have community leaders. And every time something like this happens, there is a meeting and we bring in the same old usual suspects. We talk the same old things and there's always the same outcome. One of the things I've learned over the last couple of weeks, Christian, and walking around Manchester, my hometown now, is I'm hearing from Muslim youth who are saying to me they're not engaged. Nobody's talking to them. They have phenomenal ideas about how this can be tackled. They're really keen on doing peer-to-peer stuff, but nobody's asking them. Nobody's funding it, nobody's supporting it. And so my plea to Her Majesty's government and to all political parties is to listen to our young, to get them into the room, but also to challenge those community leaders. And they're invariably male, middle class, over 50, who have no relationship at all with the young of this country, but who always have access.
But how do you find those young people?
They shouldn't be allowed access. You do what I do.
I mean, how do you decide which young person to talk to?
Again, they come to you once you've opened up the door for them. There are several organisations around the country. Today, for example, Muslim Youth came out with a phenomenally strong statement talking about these men last night being the dogs of hell, which is what the Prophet called them. And they're the kind of people that would clearly want to get their views into a room and help you and help the government come up with all sorts of solutions. And there are many, many other bodies, mostly women's groups, I have to say. Muslim women's groups around the country, fully engaged, doing phenomenal work, but they're not at all supported.
Nimco Ali, Nazir Afzal says, talk to women's groups, young women especially, are not being engaged by the government. Is there something in that?
Yeah, no, I think there is. And I think and all women are not being engaged as opposed to just young women. So I completely agree with a lot of the things that he said. And I think this idea about the Muslim community needs to be broadened out. We need to talk about the toxic masculinity that's actually going on. And there's a lot of misogyny within this. So whether we look at terrorism from the far right or so-called ISIS, it's about men that are killing people on our streets.
But when you hear Theresa May say enough's enough, things have got to change, what do you think that means?
I think that's nonsensical. I don't necessarily understand what enough is enough means. Is that what is she really going to do? So she hasn't got a plan. So I don't really know what Theresa May means on that.
Alan Mendoza, if you were advising Theresa May, you'd be calling for some radical changes.
Well, I think she's already gone down that route this morning. Enough is enough means we're going to do things very differently going forwards. In particular, we're going to, I think, start having, as she said, some very awkward conversations about radical Islam.
Well, what kind of measures do you mean?
Well, I think we have to have a discussion firstly about the nature of non-violent extremist groups who operate legally at the moment and need to be questioned whether the invective they're putting into the political mainstream should be allowed.
I mean, you know, some people would say, you know, your society isn't that far away from that with some of the things that you put out.
I don't believe that at all. I think that's an absurd analogy.
Well, give us an example of the kinds of things you'd like to do.
Very simple. The Muslim Brotherhood. Here's a good example. A report didn't really come out about it, an extensive report put into it. It's been discussed ad nauseum without the full report being launched. I think we should see that full report. We should understand exactly the pathway that non-violent extremism has in the relationship with violent extremism. We're talking about
but do you want to see control orders back? Do you want to see restrictions on civil rights?
I do want to see, no, I don't want to see internment. That's a crazy process. We need due process of law. However, what I would like to see is increased powers to the security services to intercept data, for that data to be admissible in court, and for us to be able to track people better.
Nimco Ali, what do you make of those sorts of ideas?
I don't really understand what he's talking about in the sense that the Muslim Brotherhood, again, it's a male organisation and it is a violent organisation. So the idea that you can be extremist and non-violent is quite, like, you know, nonsensical. But also let's have a look at the men that had the attacks today, and then also the guy that in Manchester last week. All those have, like, you know, criminal past, and also they also have violence against women past. So these are really angry men that are just picking up religion or whoever wants to give them some kind of legitimacy to carry on the horrible acts of crime. So they
but there is a building sense, after 3 attacks in 3 months, that perhaps there need to be new powers, perhaps there need to be new steps. Do you accept that idea at all?
No.
Or do you think the powers are there, they just need to be used?
No, the powers are there, but we're not having a conversation. So as a young black woman that's Muslim and there's many things, I'm just as likely to be attacked by a terrorist as I am to be raped on the streets of London by a man or be murdered in my own home. So let's talk about the realities of what's actually happening. These are men that are actually taking this anger towards us, and let's have a conversation and say that we need to really talk about gender inequalities and the fact that our boys are being raised to hate and take this this hate in a way where they're either blowing themselves up on our streets or killing 2 women a
Could
week.
you two work together? We've been talking a lot about people working together.
No, I think we could. I think so. We are non-partisan. And we are about having a conversation. That's
And Nimco makes a very good point about the emphasis of, sort of male ideology in this process and how women are the forgotten parties. I think one of the things that we've looked at over the past year or two is the way that if you bring women into the conversation and can open that argument up, you're going to have a long-term effect on terrorism in this country.
Right, well, stay there for now. I just want to go to Wakefield and talk to Baroness Varsi, former Conservative Party co-chair and a former Foreign Office Minister as well. Baroness Varsi, you have warned in the past about the creeping acceptability of Islamophobia. Do you fear that that's really going to be on the rise now?
Well, let's talk about what we're talking about today, Krishnan, and that is the terrorist attack in London. And I think I agree with much of what Nimco has been saying, and also your guest from Manchester, Nazir Afzal. And what they're saying effectively is that we need to have a broader engagement with Britain's Muslim communities, that they are actually part of the solution. And it's one of the things that I've talked about consistently, that unfortunately, as far back as the last Labour government, there has been a policy of disengagement. And this issue of security of our nation is far too serious an issue for it to be dealt with through the ideological whims of individual politicians. So I welcome what Theresa May has said, including the fact that there will be a review of our contest strategy to respond to the emerging threat of terrorism as we see it now.
But you were reported certainly as having had considerable concern about the government's strategy in the past when you were in the government. And what we seem to be seeing now is Theresa May saying things need to change. How do you think things need to change?
Well, things can change for the better. And what I heard this morning in Theresa May's statement was that things can change in 4 different ways. One, that we need to challenge the ideological narrative and hate preachers. That is already being done. Back in 2014, for example, we had 120 scholars from around the world who wrote an open letter to Baghdadi and dismantled his religious basis, or his so-called religious basis for his ideology. We have a fantastic project already in the United Kingdom called Imams Online. Theresa May also talked about doing more work on the internet, taking down extremist material which is used as a tool of radicalization. She talked about dealing with the issue of segregation and separation. And again, I think it's important for us to draw a distinction between those communities that want to segregate, but those who economically have no choice but to live separate lives. So I think when Theresa May talks about a Britain that works for all of Britons, then it's important to look at the economic barriers that people have to where they live and the opportunities that they are given. So I think, and of course the review of the counter-terrorism strategy, I think these are important steps. Some of them are building on work that we're already doing, but I think change doesn't have to mean a bad change. I actually think this is an opportunity for us to make our counter-terrorism strategy better, for it to be evidence-based, and I think the Extremism Commission, which the Prime Minister has already referred to, could be a basis for that.
But do you think there need to be new powers for the police? I mean, this government was forced effectively, because control orders were ruled to be illegal in the way they were being used, to replace them with a slightly weaker power called a TPIM. Do you think those powers are adequate? Because we have those powers and they don't seem to be used very often.
Well, I have consistently said that I have much more faith in our police and our intelligence services than I've often had for some of my own political parliamentary colleagues. And I think it is time for us to go back to those experts. You know, Einstein once said that if he had an hour to save the world, he'd spend 55 minutes focusing on the problem and 5 minutes trying to find the solution. I think this opportunity to think again gives us an opportunity to analyse what that problem is, what the drivers of radicalisation are, what the journeys are that people take to becoming extremists and terrorists, and looking forward, making for sure we have solutions which works with communities that make up this nation, and that there is a genuine trust between communities. Look, there is an unprecedented anger amongst British Muslim communities towards these terrorists. I've taken calls over the last 18 hours as this terrorist attack has unfolded. This is a unique opportunity to leverage that real sense that we need to work together to root out
Baroness
this
Farsi.
extremism. We saw, for example, in the Salman Abedi case in Manchester, the community reported that matter 5 times.
Just leave it
let's
there.
build upon that initiative and let's make sure we work together.
Thank you for joining us. Saeed Avasi, thank you. Well, thank you also to Nazir Afzal and here, Nimco Ali and Alan Mendoza. A reminder of tonight's news, 36 people are still being treated in hospitals across London after last night's terror attack. 7 people were killed after 3 men drove a van into crowds on London Bridge and then ran amok with knives in the busy Borough Market nearby. In the last few minutes, the French Foreign Minister has confirmed a French national was among the dead. He said 7 French citizens are in hospital and 4 of them are critical. That's it from here by London Bridge in Borough High Street. Until tomorrow at 7 o'clock. That's Channel 4 News. Have a good evening.